almost done. All right, so the first set of questions, let me cancel. Here we are. Okay, the first question was regarding the, so actually, Tom, there was quite a few questions about the Florent Park. Do you want to just start there? I won't do the first one, or do you want me to do the first one around the ICF? Is it possible, the ICF level? Do you want to do that one?
Sure. We had built, as mentioned, in Airmount Woods and Ramsey, and that was designed for a higher need autistic population. And the plan at that time was that that design would be leveraged and used throughout the state to begin to repatriate people who were being served outside of the state. Things got off track with all of the turmoil, I would call it, around the state transition plan. That seems to have subsided. There's new leadership at DDD, and I think there's an opportunity to revisit developing those kinds of residential settings in a more planful way with the Department of Developmental Disabilities. And I said that I would undertake that conversation with the DDD Director of Housing and the Assistant Commissioner in charge of DDD. Great.
Diane, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, we've raised that issue as well. And, before COVID, we had started the dialogue. We do have Amy Scartosi, who's the new Director of Housing, being part of our, we're doing a housing navigation course, and we've asked her to comment on that, on where we are with this transition plan and what the department is looking at, in terms of allowing certain, an expansion of ideas there that is certainly available in other states and perfectly acceptable. So we like to do that. We started doing that.
So maybe in the future we can have a webinar if there's any progress there to circle back with the audience, but all right, perfect. So Tom, there's quite a bit of questions around application deadlines. So one of them specifically for the housing project in Florent Park, it said that application deadline has passed. Is that true? Can people still apply?
Yes, technically the application deadline has passed. As part of our affirmative marketing plan that we have to deploy when renting up a project like that, we have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That said, we are still accepting applications. So I would ask folks if they still are interested to, of course, submit an application while we apply more formally for an extension of the application period.
Would you recommend that for a lot of these housing projects that potentially have application deadlines to still submit applications, or kind of is it a case-by-case basis?
I think it's more case by case, and I think the deadline that we had for Florent Park might have been a little bit more truncated than it should have been given the size of the project. But typically they're usually ample timing, but in this case, and again, also because of COVID, I think, just creating some delayed responses. But if folks want to complete an application, please submit it.
Okay, great. How long do these projects take from start to finish? That was a good question that was posed last night.
Well, that varies. They can be built, in as little as under 2 years from start to finish, from planning board approval to permitting to actual construction to CO. And then in other cases, they can take several years. So each one is, there's no common denominator or common sort of template. They all vary, just depends upon the particulars of a project, the amount of site work, the financing restrictions, the ability to get our permits and inspections. So typically, a project is 24 to 36 months from start to finish, typically.
Okay. It's like any other housing project. Yeah. And another question about is Ridgewood already full? That's another housing development that was asked about.
No, it's not. It's still under construction. We haven't put up the application yet. We're hoping to do that for the apartments, that is. We're hoping to do that probably mid to late November. We expect completion on that project in the February timeframe.
Okay, great. As you've been speaking about budgets to operate these developments, the question is, what happens if the organization goes bankrupt? What happens to the individual who is currently living in those areas or those houses?
Well, in the case of the service provider, for a group home, for example, in that unfortunate circumstance, then what we would do is we would go to our bench, if you will, and look for existing service providers that we have existing relationships with, and ask them to take over and fill in. And we would do that in concert with the State Department of Developmental Disabilities. That's not happened, fortunately, and hopefully it won't. In the case of us as a developer, and should we, as the property manager or the landlord, hit the financial rocks, which we are. We are not, by the way. Then there's, there is a succession strategy in place. There is a period. Each one of these projects that we have, not everyone, but most of them have deed restrictions and reverters that have specific actions spelled out in the event that there's any diminishment in terms of the property management or other aspects of the project. There's a cure period. And then there's a transition period to a new owner or new provider. Very, very remote. Not going to happen. In our case, we were incorporated in 1962 and have been going strong. And I would expect to get to 2062 and then put in my retirement papers.
Yeah. So I agree with Tom. I think that is certainly a concern. I could see that parents would be concerned about that. People would be concerned. But I haven't seen too much of that happen. And there are contingency plans. And we've seen some mergers in service providers, some service providers getting help from larger organizations to maintain their stability. But in the cases I'm thinking of, it didn't affect the units, it didn't affect the properties, it didn't affect the people living there. They continued to get services through just a bigger organization. So it can happen, but it's really is kind of a remote risk because DDD and the state, they don't want this to happen. They've put all kinds of hoops to jump through. Tom is like, yes, the hoops. Just so this doesn't happen, they're very, kind of risk averse in that way. So, I would say that it doesn't happen really that often.
I mean, we did have a question about expanding upon what are those kind of partnerships with the service providers that you've mentioned. So, can you discuss a little more in helping the audience understand what their role is or what they do for how you build and all this stuff?
Sure. So in the case of group homes, we have existing relationships with well-known service providers that we have established ties with. When we add a service provider, which we've done a couple of times in the last 2 years, we actually visit with that service provider. We view their existing programs. We do everything we can to make sure there's a cultural fit, a values fit, and make sure that they're comfortable with us and our style. We don't view ourselves as just a landlord. We're involved in all aspects of our projects after completion. We employ 3 housing services coordinators who act as liaisons on a day-to-day basis for any property management issues or other concerns that a service provider might have. We also help that service provider make introductions for that service provider in the community with either service organizations, governmental offices, whatever the case might be. So we're pretty close to our developments. And we're very close to our service providers. It's a partnership that we view as being absolutely vital to the quality of the development. So we understand that the bricks are one thing, but really it's all about the services. So while we're not a service provider, we nevertheless stay involved in the lives of our residents. So it's a very tight fit.
Great. Next question. So can a few families pull together resources to build one home for their adult children?
The answer is yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of conversations, and I'm thinking Diane may have had even more conversations than I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, on that, yes, the short answer is yes, and I'll turn it over to Diane, who can probably be
Yeah, they can. And I guess the question then is why, to make sure that people are thinking through what that means, because it means taking on the running of a home. It means sharing that responsibility and having agreements, like what happens if one person wants to get out. There is actually right on our housing search. Right now, you can look up housing in Morris County, and the home of the 5 friends comes up, and that's in a home that 5 people bought in, 5 families bought in together and bought this home, and they manage it. And now they're looking for 1 opening. So there's contacts there. They can contact that person. So it can be done. I guess the question is, when you think about it, how difficult is it going to be to find 5 matches, and how difficult is it going to be to enter into a partnership with several people? And you really have to document who's running it, how it's going to run. It's a lot of work. And someday, who's going to take over that work for you? So as you get older, do you have someone in your family who can take that over? Is that the best resource for the person? Is that what they want? So what are you getting out of that? What are you getting, and what are you worried about? So it's something to think through. Some housing financing may not be open to you if you're doing your own thing, whereas it's open to developers and not necessarily open to individuals trying to merge. You might have to just get a mortgage yourself. So in housing vouchers, that may or may not be allowed. You have to be careful about that in terms of supportive housing connection vouchers, because technically you're not allowed to be the landlord, at the same time as you're the renter. So there's some question about how to set that up. But, yes, it can be done, and it has been done successfully, but there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors in that.
Yeah.
So do the municipalities have a deadline by which they need to build affordable housing, or is each town governed by their own settlement agreement?
Yes, each town has its own settlement agreement, and those settlement agreements often include milestones in terms of specific activities that need to be accomplished by certain dates. So a site plan hearing, a building permit, a certificate of occupancy are sometimes included in settlement agreements when a municipality has stated that, look, we're going to build X number of units of supportive housing. So the court will come back, or the special master that is the translator, I would say, for the courts and the municipalities, or the go-between, will say, okay, so put some accountability to that. Tell us when you're going to have a site plan hearing. Tell us when you expect to issue a building permit. Tell us when you're going to have a CO. So yes, increasingly every settlement agreement, regardless of whether it includes supportive housing, if it calls for specific units to be built, will all include now a chronology of when those units will be completed.
And I would say that people can ask of their town, what their agreement is. It should be public information that they should be able to get or receive. And if their planning is not online, because sometimes their plans are online, they can ask for that too. And they should. Everybody should be doing that.
Good advice. And here's a plug for your website that you were talking about. Is there a website that has the inventory or affordable housing options across New Jersey? And I know, Diane, you've mentioned the SHA.org having that new feature that we use.
So I wish I could tell you that there was one place someone could go and they can find it all out. But there's a couple of good things that have happened. So actually, HMFA has a Housing Resource Center. If they Google that, they should be able to get to a website with a very robust search engine. And technically, developers and anybody getting money from the state, et cetera, should be advertising on there, should be posting their openings on there. It does, I think now that is going to be the case in terms of electronically advertising. They just passed a new legislation that is requiring people to electronically advertise. Prior to this, they would send notices to newspapers, and that's how you'd find out about a development. And they had to do that. And they had to do a certain amount of outreach that way. But now it has to be included in electronic outreach, which is going to be I think going to be a game changer in terms of getting information to more people. So the Housing Resource Center, some complaints about that is that oftentimes you'll go on there and you'll get information, then you'll call and it's already gone. So it's not really as timely as we'd like to see. We did a short, quick and dirty one for our website. It's very easy to use. And we'll try to be doing some outreach on our own to get that, because I think it will lend itself to a little bit more diversity in the kinds of options. For example, this House of the Five Friends. I don't know that they could post that on the Housing Resource Center, but yet they can post it on our website. So there'll be different options there. So, but it really depends on how much outreach we can get, because we need the information to post, right? Yeah. So I would say Housing Resource Center is the first stop. And Piazza Associates and CDG, what is that other one that Tom, that?
CPME, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. They are the people that really help to promote that and all of that information. So their websites have opportunities. I'll get that for you before we leave. But those two websites also have information. In our resource bulletins, if you look on the housing, on our SHOT website, the resource bulletins, if you look under affordable housing and rental assistance, I believe those links of Piazza and everything are in there.
Oh, great. Okay, so I'll link that.
Are in there. Yeah, we put them in there.
Yeah. Perfect.
So it's hard. It's not easy. You know, it's not. I wish I could tell you it is.
Sounds like a cat and mouse game, just kind of keeping your eye on where it's coming.
And driving around your neighborhood and looking for developments, as silly as that sounds.
Well, it's how housing works right now too. So can you have, there's a lot of questions about this actually. Can you have a support person for your child living in one of the supportive housing apartments?
Yes, you can. Absolutely. Yes. And that is allowed. You can have a live-in basically. If the need allows, if the needs are there, then you should be able to make the case for having that. Yes, is the answer to that. In our the videos, we have a couple of, we have one that is Matt and Dan share a home, and that is something that kind of brings together some of these questions. So one family bought the home, the townhouse, and needed a rental for another person for it. They also had a live-in to help Matt. And so another family heard about this, and now their son lives with Matt. So it's Matt and Dan, and they share that resource person. They share the live-in. So that's an interesting, opportunity that people can look at. But yes, is
great.
How hard is that?
So this is a very specific question, but as a parent of a dual diagnosed son, my fear is that he will be kicked out of housing if medication stops working at some stage. What happens if one of your tenants has to leave? I'm sorry, it's cut off. Do they get placed elsewhere?
Well, no one has, we have some residents who have dual diagnoses, and we have some residents who have some challenging behaviors. We have not evicted anyone. There have been folks who have left of their own accord to sometimes require more of a hospital-like setting. But we do not send anyone out of, or haven't sent anyone out of any of the group homes, nor have the service providers that we partner with. So we haven't had that situation.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that they would have to look at what's happening with the person. Is that the right setting? Is it, what's going on with them? Do they have the right services?
If someone's decompensating, so to speak, every effort's made to try to understand exactly what's happening, and there might be an underlying condition. Someone who's nonverbal may have a medical condition. And we have had those circumstances where there's been a sudden and abrupt change in behavior, and have always, in every case, not that it has happened that frequently, but there's been an underlying undetected medical complication, frankly pain, that has caused the person to behave differently. So in a way, their behavior was a call for help. So.
Right. It's complicated.
Yeah. But it's good that you're doing that research and just finding out what, making a decision so quickly. Then I have another question here about, can properties include both housing and supported employment or day programs, or does DDD still require housing and programs to be separate?
To my knowledge, it's separate, right? Still.
Right.
Yeah,
those are two separate functions, right? And that goes back to someone had asked, I think, about the developmental centers. They don't want to create a closed system. So the benefit of having a day program or a vocational program elsewhere means that folks are out in transit in the community, going to different locales. So it's not a closed ecosystem. That would be their rationale.
And that the person has choice.
Correct.
Not that they have to have that program.
Right.
They can choose to have whatever their needs are. And
Good
their
point.
choice. So
decoupling housing and services, is a hallmark, I guess, of the state transition plan now.
So if someone were to look at arranging supports, staff or aides for the individuals, who would need to do that? Would it be the parent? Would it be, is there a resource?
Oh, that's a whole thing. The parents really need to be talking to support coordinators, and there's a whole plan that, the parents are gonna, and the person, if they can, as much as they are able to, there's a whole person-centered planning thing that goes on, and they would either get the agency to help them, or pick an agency or a support coordinator that helps to gather all of that to help.
Yeah, I believe
I think in the
that last webinar too, a little bit in detail.
I think that's the self-directed program where the parent or guardian takes on responsibility for arranging basically the kinds of functions that a service provider would, or services that a service provider would for a group home, for example, done in a more individual setting.
Yeah, and they can do that. We like to see that, because it means that person is designing a life they want for them, and they have more control. It is a lot of work, though, for the parent, because that's putting a lot of things together, but a lot of parents do it, and we like to see that. And it's made for very unique and creative housing opportunities for them, homes for them.
So now we have some specific questions, and I think I'm just going to wrap it up into a single question for you, Tom. A lot of it's about, what are your plans for developing across New Jersey? Is there plans in central New Jersey, and we have specifically central and North Jersey? What's coming up that some families should be aware of?
So we have a project that we're working on in Reddington, which is kind of central west Jersey. We're working on a project in collaboration with Madison, the neighbor of Florent Park. We're working on a project in East Hanover with the governing body in East Hanover. And there's a project in Warren that we'll be having a site plan application, Warren Township, that we'll be having a site plan application for after the election, before Thanksgiving this November. And there's several other projects that are in the pipeline, but are in more confidential discussions with governing bodies, and not appropriate yet for me to talk about publicly until they've signed off, if you will, on them. But we're pretty busy, and we have some pretty exciting projects in the pipeline, some very unique projects in the pipeline. So exciting. So more. As we become public, or they can become public, we update our project tracker, and that's available on our website. So I would just suggest folks to visit our website from time to time to see what we have projects in development, projects under construction, completed projects, and that's updated pretty regularly. So folks can stop in and take a look there to see what's new.
Great. That was gonna be one of my questions as well. So that seems to be kind of all of the questions that were for today. Obviously, if we have more, I'll send them your way. But is there any final thoughts or notes you guys want to say before we sign off?
So I found the other organization. It's actually the affordablehomesgroup.com is where they post all of their
Okay.
opportunities. So that's something I would have them visit.
Great.
Those.
I'll put that into the website. I'll link that out too, so that people can easily access that, as well as your website and that new hub that you have, and also the project tracker. I think those three seem to be really important questions, important ways for people to keep an eye on what's happening around New Jersey. Well, again, thank you guys for the extra time. I really appreciate your patience with me, and I'm going to post this along with the video and the recording. It'll be on our Spectrum 360 website as well. So if you wanted to use it for anything in your purposes, please feel free to do that. But thank you, and on behalf of Bruce and Spectrum 360, thank you. One last thing, Diane.
Yeah, I just want to say they should look at the 2 videos, Matt and Dan Share a Home, and also Shared Housing in an Urban Environment, because it pulls together a lot of what we discussed.
Okay, I'll pull those from the website. I'll link them right to your website, so that'll make it easier.
All right.
Well, thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. And
Thank you.
well.
Have a great time. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye-bye.